Hi, it's Ryan Frank, and welcome to the YouTube version of my podcast. I'm so glad that you've tuned in. I am a pastor, an entrepreneur. I love talking about faith, family, and anything to do with leadership and productivity. So every week in my podcast, I talk to you about hacks that'll help you be a better leader. I share with you things that God is teaching me right now. I talked about what's going on in our family and in our businesses. I share with you resources and products and ideas you absolutely need to know about. And then I wrap up every week by talking about a quote. I'm a bit of a quote nerd, and so I love sharing good quotes with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, let's start today's episode. Merry Christmas. Christmas is right around the corner. I believe this podcast is going to drop on Christmas Eve. If you're actually listening to me on Christmas Eve, wow, that's quite an honor. Maybe you're catching the podcast as you're driving down the road, heading to the church, heading to a family gathering, or maybe you're catching this podcast after Christmas. Whenever you're listening, wherever you're listening, from our entire family, Merry Christmas. Hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful time with your new year or with your friends and family, and that you have a blessed new year. What kind of traditions do you celebrate as a family? I was thinking about Christmas traditions literally as I was about ready to push record on the podcast today. And, you know, we've got 3 girls at home ranging from age 7 to 17. And so we've been doing this Christmas thing for a while as a family with kids, and several years before that, just Beth and I. And we have some Christmas traditions that go back 20 years. One of those being we love to watch Home Alone while we put up the Christmas tree and while we put decorations on the tree. Kind of a random thing, but we save Home Alone. We don't watch it all year. We save it until it's time to put up that Christmas tree. Our girls like to drive and look at Christmas lights in our hometown. You can drive through the park, and they've got it all set up with dinosaurs and Winter Wonderland and the 12 Days of Christmas. And so one tradition we have is that we go through the McDonald's drive-through and take McDonald's as we're doing the lights. Now, that may not seem like anything special to you. You've got to understand, Beth and I do not enjoy McDonald's. There's really nothing except for the Coke and Diet Coke and the French fries that we like from McDonald's. So for our girls, this is a big deal because we very rarely take them through the McDonald's drive-through. We let them open up their stockings on Christmas Eve. We go to church for Christmas Eve communion. So we love family traditions, and I'm sure you do as well. Whether this Christmas is a special one for you, maybe you're newly married, or you have a first child or a first grandchild, or whether this Christmas is a difficult one for you. Maybe you've lost a loved one. Perhaps you've lost your job this year. Maybe whatever's going on, whether it's feels like a good season for you right now or a difficult season. I hope that today's podcast encourages you and that you find some help and some hope, because what I want to talk to you about today is why I believe in Santa Claus. That's right, on the Ryan Frank podcast, why I believe in Santa Claus. I'm going to talk to you about that. I think you're going to find the story very intriguing, encouraging, hopefully inspiring. But first, let's talk about a leadership hack. Yes, before we jump into why I believe in Santa Claus, I want to talk to you about growing your capacity. We're ending a calendar year. We have days left, and we're going to be propelled into 2022. And if you're anything like me, you start thinking about the new year and plans and what do I want to accomplish in 2022? What are some goals? We all probably set some New Year resolutions that we want to implement at work and at home and with our family and in our personal lives. And a lot of it hinges upon your capacity for more. So you can have this novel, lofty goal of saving more money, but if you don't have capacity to earn more money or save that money, you're not going to hit your goal. Maybe you want to launch that new business this year. We've got to have capacity to launch that business. Maybe you're wanting to create a podcast or a new website this year. Maybe you're wanting to really tackle some serious health and wellness goals. Well, you've got to make sure you have capacity in your life to add those new things in that you want to add in. Capacity, this whole idea of capacity for more. Margin is another way of saying it, for more. It is the lifeblood of a leader, because capacity really allows you to get done the things that you want to get done. Leadership and leading people, it's not about a title, not about a job description. It's really, at the end of the day, it's about capacity. It's about doing the things that you need to do. So I want to share with you a few ways to grow your capacity. I think this is a very timely conversation for us to have on the podcast today, especially as we enter a new year. First of all, I want you to understand what could be. Understand what could be. Do you really see what could happen if you had capacity for more? Just think about it. If you had a few more hours in your workday every day, think about what could be. Think about what could happen if your brain had some more capacity and you weren't constantly trying to remember things and chase things down, but you actually had some capacity in your brain to think and dream and brainstorm and create. The problem is what we often talk about. It's the tyranny of the urgent. That is, we get so busy with urgent things that we really forget the important things. Urgent things like we're constantly responding to emails, responding to social media notifications, responding to people knocking on the door, responding to the consequences of me not being organized. Where I'm responding to the effects of sloppy delegation and not explaining things right. And I live in this responsive mode, and as a result, I live in the tyranny of the urgent, and I don't have time to focus on the important things. What I want for each one of you podcast listeners is this. I don't want you to live reactively. I want you to live proactively. There's a big difference, and it's a game changer when you think about capacity. Am I constantly reacting? Do I wake up reacting to problems? Do I wake up reacting to some of the problems are problems that come from others on my team or people that work around me? And some of the problems I'm reacting to bad decisions I've made. Am I constantly reacting, or am I being proactive? Do I really see what could be? Now, this is a great time of year for us to have this conversation. We're going into a new year. Do you see what could be in 2022 for your family, for your company, for your organization, for your ministry, for your schedule, for your health, for your wellness, for your finances, in your relationships? Do you see what could be? I hope that you do. That's the first step in growing your capacity and your margin for more. Second, you've got to get to where you're empowering people. At the end of the day, if you want to grow your capacity, you cannot do everything yourself. You've got to allow your kids to do some things around the house. You've got to allow your employees to do some things that you're doing right now that you don't need to be doing. You need to put some of you that work in organizations that you rely so much on volunteers. You've got to give some more responsibility to volunteers. You've got to raise some leaders up. How well are you doing giving people the tools, the resources, and the power or authority to do what needs to be done? You don't need to do everything, and I don't need to do everything. I read one time several years ago, the 85-15-5 rule. And that is 85% of the things that you are doing, anyone else could be doing. Okay? 15 or 10%, it's 85-10-5, not 85-15-5. 85-10-5. I typed this wrong on my notes. I'm going to fix it right now while I'm thinking about it. 10% of what you're doing, someone else could do if they were trained. 5% of what you're doing, only you can do. Now let me read those statistics again. 85% of what you're doing, anyone else could do. 10% of what you're doing, someone else could do if they were trained. Only 5% of what you are doing, only you can do. Now you need to identify what are those things that only I can do. Everything else, who could help me with this? Who could I train? Who could I empower? Who could I resource? Who could I put some tools in their hands so they can do it? And the result, I've got capacity for more. I can take on more. Do you view yourself as an enabler? You've got to view yourself as someone who enables other people to do their work and to do some of your work. Be willing to let go, to release ownership. Be willing to let go of control. I know that's difficult for some of you, so that other people can lead. If you are always the doer and never the enabler, then you're really not a leader, and you'll never grow your capacity for more. For so many people, their what ifs die under the heavy weight of what is. We feel the pressure of expectations, the pressure of time, the pressure of supervisors and bosses and people. And we think we have stress issues. I'm just so stressed about time, and I'm so stressed about people and demands. But we're wrong. It's really not stress issues that get us. It's capacity issues. And so I want you to take a look at what you're doing. Take a look at what could be and what's getting in the way. What can you do today and this week to give yourself some capacity for more in 2022? What could you start doing to create some margin in your life to do those big things, those what ifs that you've always wanted to do? And as you go into 2022, refuse to let the what ifs die under the heavy weight of what is. All right, friends, in our What is God Teaching Me segment of the podcast today, I want to talk to you about the importance of giving. The importance of giving, something God talks a lot about, something that we think about, especially this time of year, Christmas. In particular, I want to talk to you today about why I believe in Santa Claus. Now, some of you skipped the last segment of the podcast and you just went right to this part because you are wondering, what on earth is Ryan Frank talking about that he believes in Santa Claus? Well, let me give you a little context behind this conversation. Every fall, we have a conference for kids pastors that we run called MegaCon. And some of you that listen to the podcast are kids pastors and you attend MegaCon. Thank you so much for your support. MegaCon attracts over 2,000 kids pastors every year. And it's held at Cornerstone Church in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, when we began having our conference at Cornerstone Church, I walked into the pastor's office, introduced myself, and had a wonderful conversation. And when I left that meeting, Mari Davis gave me one of his books titled Why I Believe in Santa Claus. And this sent me on a journey and to be quite honest, I was really dumbfounded because I had never really researched or understood the story of St. Nicholas. So much of what I'm going to share with you over the next few minutes is based upon Mari Davis's book, Why I Believe in Santa Claus. You know, as you travel, you find people who have never heard of Jesus, never heard of the Apostle Peter, Paul, John, but everywhere you go, everyone knows the name Santa Claus. And what I'm going to do right now on the podcast, just days before Christmas, is I'm going to tell you the story of St. Nicholas. Who is Santa Claus? Is he myth? Is he a myth? Is he a fantasy? Is he a figment of some author's overactive imagination? Some cruel lie perpetuated on the innocent minds of the naive or the gullible? You know, sometimes we have become so religious, especially those of us that belong to a faith community and we identify with the person and the work of Jesus Christ, that we fight against things that we really don't need to fight against. I've heard of people that say Santa is just Satan with the letters mixed up. I've had people say, and even in my own church, well, we don't tell our kids about Santa Claus because we don't want to lie to our kids. So let's talk about that for a minute. Should you tell your kids about Santa Claus or not? Let's be honest. Okay, I'm a parent of 3 girls. I talked to you about that a few minutes ago on the podcast. We all lie to our kids at times. In fact, let me share with you 10 lies that we share, that we often, as parents, tell our kids. Here's one. I don't want you to go to sleep. I just want you to rest. Okay? This is why I'm putting you in a dark room under blankets. That's a lie. No, you do want them to go to sleep. Here's another one. I think Chuck E. Cheese is closed today, so we can't go. Have you ever said that one? Be honest. How do you answer the question, where do babies come from? Wow, some of you have lied over and over and over again, right? If you don't drink your milk, you won't grow big and strong. Well, that has very little actually to do with how much milk you drink. What about this lie? I would have never done that when I was your age. Or this lie. We can't go to the park's closed. Now here's a lie that I'm sure we've all told over and over again, and that is on a road trip when you say we're almost there, right? Even though you still have 2 or 3 hours to go, you tell your kids we're almost there. What about this lie? When asked a question by your kids, I don't know. When actually you may know, you just don't have the time or want to take the time or have the energy to explain the answer. Or this one, we'll see. Can we do this? We'll see. When that we'll see, you know, is a no. What about this one? The classic, I'll check on you in a minute as you say goodnight, right? My point is that some lies are just life. Lies are lies. And some lies are legitimate lies and some lies are just life. We all know the difference. And here's what I want to do today is I want to tell you the truth about Santa Claus. Now, history tells us that during the 4th century, there lived a person by the name of Nick. Nick was raised in a Christian home. His parents had great wealth. He was schooled in the Bible. He grew up enjoying sitting and listening to his parents tell stories about Jesus and his miracles of healing and caring for the needy. He yearned for Christ to come back and do it again. He had a natural bent toward spiritual things. In fact, he wanted Christ to come back so he could meet him. His parents taught Nick that God was still doing his miracles, but they're through the body of Christ. And Nick learned that we, the church, are his hands extended. Nick's parents died while he was a teenager, and he found himself, as a result, independently wealthy. He didn't have to work. He just had everything that he needed. And he sought God's direction for his life. About this time, the Bishop of Turkey died. Now, finding a replacement was difficult, because they wanted to get just the man that God wanted. The head of the church council had a dream and was told by God to stand at the door the next morning. And the first person named Nick to come in should be named bishop. Now just imagine Nick's shock when he was appointed Bishop of Turkey in 300 AD. Now, as bishop, history tells us he was a very good bishop. He held true to the word of God. When the Arian controversy arose, which denied the deity of the Lord, he stood against it. He was actually imprisoned for his bold preaching against evil by the Emperor Diocletian, although I don't feel like I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he was locked up for 5 years. He wasn't freed until Constantine became the emperor of Rome and set him free. He attended the first church council in Nicaea, which gave us the Nicene Code. And you've heard it before. We believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, and so on. Bishop Nick was a theologian, and he was responsible for spreading the gospel to much of the world. Nick learned early in his ministry as bishop that faith without works is dead. He was a student of the book of James in the New Testament. Faith and works was the theme of his ministry. He had a great amount of wealth, and as the bishop, he knew he didn't need it, but he really had a desire to help people. So what he would do, get this, he would literally disguise himself and go through the city at night, leaving presents to meet people's greatest needs. He would wrap them and leave them on doorsteps or places where they would find them. People had no idea where these gifts were coming from, but they recognized their gifts. Bishop Nicholas coined the phrase, "The secret of giving is giving in secret." Now, Nick especially liked children. And there was a nobleman who had 3 daughters that lost his entire fortune. Nicholas knew that the father would not have a dowry, which was important back then, for his girls to get married in the same class which they had known and grown up in. The father and the girls would not be respected without that dowry. So when it was time for the first daughter to marry, Nick left a bag of gold for the first daughter, and no one knew where it came from. Second daughter, same thing. Now, he got caught on the third daughter, and he begged not to tell, because remember, the secret of giving is giving in secret. But people aren't real good at keeping secrets. And word spread through Turkey, and the bishop became even more respected for his good works. For years, he taught that giving in secret will produce a blessing. And he kept on giving because people were catching on. And others started giving gifts in secret. The people he helped kept his secret going by helping others, by giving gifts, and they really never took the credit. When they were questioned, they would say, well, Saint Nick must have bought you those gifts. Well, Nick eventually died, and the Roman Catholic Church made a saint out of him. They created a St. Nicholas celebration every year in the community where they lived. They tried to figure out how to celebrate. So they made a statue of St. Nicholas. Now, they didn't make the guy with the red suit. He was a bishop, so they made him with royal robes and a hat. You can Google the image and see this statue. They put that statue on a sleigh pulled by reindeer and pulled that sleigh down the street. They had little kids walking by the sleigh, and they threw candy to the people who lined the streets of that parade. Now, this is where the story gets fun, for me. Sailors from Italy heard the story. They spread it, and wherever it was told, remarkable things happened. A spirit of generosity was kindled, and the people embraced the concept of secret giving. From Italy, it traveled to Germany. His name went from Saint Nick to Saint Nikolaus. It went from Germany to Holland, and his name went from Saint Nikolaus to Santa Claus. The Dutch brought the story to New York City. In English, Santa Claus became Santa Claus. But the story doesn't end there. Dr. Clement C. Moore was at home on Christmas Eve. He was 50 years old. He was a distinguished professor of theology at a New York seminary. His father was a famous Episcopalian clergy who had participated in the inauguration of our very first president, George Washington. And he comforted Alexander Hamilton after he lay dying from a bullet wound given by Aaron Burr. You know the story. This is a very well-known family. Dr. Moore, though is not remembered for his writings or for his father, he is remembered for a poem that he penned in less than 1 hour on Christmas Eve in 1822. On Christmas Eve in 1822, Mrs. Moore was packing baskets for the poor and was one turkey short. She sent Dr. Moore out in falling snow to the store for a turkey. His caretaker drove him to the store in a buggy. His caretaker's name was Jan Deichnick. He was short. He was a chubby man with a big red nose, dimples on his chin, and a full beard. As they talked, the caretaker told him the Dutch custom of Santa Claus. He didn't tell him about the North Pole, or about elves, or Buddy the Elf, but of St. Nicholas. He told him how the people of Holland still celebrated St. Nicholas Day. Told him about the statue of Nick in a sleigh pulled by reindeer around the city, children lining the streets, knowing that someone dressed in a red suit with white trim would pass out candy and gifts up and down the street. Dr. Moore went home with a mental picture of Jan Deichnick, his Dutch caretaker, on his mind, and the celebration of St. Nick. He sat down and wrote what would become his legacy. 'Twas the night before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. He wrote the poem to share the story of St. Nicholas with his own children. St. Nick, Santa Claus, Santa Claus was a real person who, more than any other man, except for Jesus Christ, personifies the Spirit of God. He continues to live on in the hearts of people when we practice the giving of gifts at Christmas time. What made Santa Claus so famous? Why do more people know about him than anyone else? I think it's because how he lived his life. What did St. Nicholas do? Well, he modeled principles that you and I need to learn from and live by. One, he heard the word of God and did it. Okay? You know, accumulating knowledge without a corresponding action never produces the desired results. We don't go to school just so we can get an education. We go to school so we can learn something, right? And he heard God's word and he did something about it. Remember, your actions are what really matter. He also saw a need and he did something about it. We aren't paid because of our education. We're paid because of the problems we solve. And the greater the problems we solve, the greater the benefits. How many of us walk by problems of life and fail to solve them? not with St. Nicholas. Third, he found a reason to live, and he lived it. He knew there was something significant that he was placed on earth to do. And listen, podcast listeners, the same is true for you. Your life is not made for mediocrity, but significance. Your purpose is greater than your circumstances. Another great application point from the book that I talked to you about earlier is he found a key and he shared it. The key? That the secret of giving is giving in secret. Another key that St. Nicholas got from the book of James: faith without works is dead. Finally, here's a great application for us. He gave his life for Christ. You know, what are you giving your life for? The things of this earth are temporal. But you know what? We're all going to live forever one day. And my hope for you is that you'll live forever in heaven, which comes from having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Don't forget this Christmas season what really matters. Yes, I believe in Santa Claus. And you know what? I plan on seeing him in heaven one day. Until then, I want to be just like him. And I want that for you. All right, it's time for the latest and greatest segment of the podcast, where I talk to you about the latest and greatest in our family and with our ministry and businesses. Thank you so much for caring, first and foremost. I hope that when I share these short stories with you, that they encourage you and inspire you and motivate you in whatever God has placed in front of you. We each have our divine appointments, people that we get to work with, and opportunities that are unique just to us. Over at Lucy's drive-thru and car wash, things are going great. We're selling a ton of gift cards right now, of course, because of Christmas. So super thankful for all of our team at Lucy's. On the KidMen side of things, most of you know that we run a big conference every fall called MegaCon. Attracts over 2,000 kids pastors. And we don't do it alone. We partner with over 90 different organizations that show up. They have a booth space. Some of them have things to sell. Some are resource providers. We have authors that show up. We have curriculum publishers that show up. All kinds of great organizations. And so in January, we're opening up our application process for our ministry partners. And so we're doing it new this year, where we're trying to secure all of our partnerships and what level partner each organization wants to be. We're trying to take care of all of that in January. So our team right now is building this page and corresponding with our ministry partners, preparing for this big January application window. With Frank Insurance Management, we've got some great momentum happening. I'm meeting with someone today that I'm hoping will come and work with us. We did find some office space just north of Indianapolis, around between Indianapolis and Carmel. We have not signed a lease agreement yet. It's been like 2.5 weeks. Hopefully before Christmas, we'll get that lease agreement signed. But we are selling, we're writing policies, and things are going great. On the property side of things, I just learned yesterday that we are closing January the 4th on a 26-unit apartment complex in Galveston, Indiana. So we're pretty pumped about that and grateful. Our down payment for this big, beautiful complex is being taken care of through a refinance of another property. That's always great when you can do that, refinance and use that equity to buy something else. So a lot of great things happening, good momentum. We are taking some time to slow down and rest during this Christmas season, but we don't want to lose momentum. Momentum is huge, you get that. But do take some time to rest. I shared with you, I believe last week, that old quote that all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And it doesn't make Jack just dull. It makes Jack and Jill, for that matter, dull and ineffective. And it's not healthy if all you do is work, and never slow down to play. So I hope that this season you will slow down a little bit, but don't lose your momentum. 2022 is going to be a great year. All right, friends, here's a resource that you absolutely must know about. It's the Ryan Frank Printable Productivity Playbook. That's right. And big news today, I'm giving it to all of our podcast listeners for free. Whether you are watching the YouTube version of the podcast or listening to the audio version of the podcast, you can get the Ryan Frank Printable Productivity Playbook for free. The idea of having a daily one sheet was shared with me several years ago in a seminar, and I've adapted that one sheet and I've created a reproducible playbook where it'll help you plan your year, your month, your week, even your social media posts, and your day. Now, planning your day, I believe, is the most effective part of my productivity playbook. Every day, I print off a new sheet. Those of you watching on YouTube, it kind of looks like this. And it answers 3 questions. What are some priorities that I need to work on today? Who are some people that I need to reach out to today? And what can I do to move some projects forward? Now, I teach you how to use this productivity playbook. Every day, create this, because here's the thing: if you don't set priorities for your day, someone else will. And unless your job is customer service, then it's okay for others to dictate your day. But most of us, we need to choose how we're going to use our day. So the first thing I do every day before I check my email, before I get on social media, is I print off my daily productivity playbook and I establish my priorities for the day. Now, anytime you're working with people or leading people, it's all subject to change, right? It just takes one phone call, one crisis. But for the most part, I get a lot of stuff done because I work off a daily productivity playbook. We talked earlier about being proactive, not reactive. My productivity playbook will help you do that. You can get it right now for free at kidsmatter.com. I'll place the link inside the show notes on YouTube and on the podcast. And if you use the promo code podcast when you check out, it will auto-magically make it free. That's right. This is a $12 download, but it's yours free because it's Christmas time. And because I appreciate you listening, tuning into the podcast, and I want to help you have a great 2022. Download the Ryan Frank Printable Productivity Playbook at kidsmatter.com. Once again, the link is below in the show notes. And if you use the promo code podcast, it's yours entirely free. All right, our quote of the week goes back to Saint Nick, Bishop Nicholas. The secret of giving is giving in secret. You know, the Bible talks about this in Matthew 6. It says, give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. Now, you don't always have to give in secret, but sometimes it's effective to give in secret. Sometimes it's okay to give openly where everybody knows about it. I think the key is a few verses earlier in Matthew 6. Jesus said, be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. You know, if you're giving gifts openly just to get attention to yourself, in other words, if you are coughing loudly as you give so everybody sees you give, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because it's not about you, it's not about me. We should give our gifts quietly because the benefit is not for you or me, it's the person I am giving to. Jesus said, when you give to the needy, don't announce it with trumpets like the hypocrites do, to be honored by men. It's not just to be seen by others. What can you do today to bless somebody? Remember, the secret of giving is giving in secret. It doesn't have to mean a tangible thing that you buy. Maybe you give a word of affirmation, a word of encouragement. A lot of times those are worth much more than money. Podcast listeners, thank you for tuning in. Whether you're watching the YouTube version of the podcast or listening today, your attention means the world to me. Please be sure to subscribe. Let's stay tuned in between episodes. You can find all of my social media links at ryanfrank.com. We'll talk to you next time.